and I asked the very first person on the very first table, how long do you think a business owner will tell you it's going to take for them to get ready for their business to be sold? And he said,
welcome to this week's episode of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Chris. Good to be with you again. Are you feeling better? Because you're a little under the weather last week.
I was, yes. And chest infection. So taking some medicine and feeling raring to go again today. Thank you, Kevin. And how was your weekend? I believe there was lots going on.
Just checking though. Did you have somebody nice to rub a Vicks on your chest?
Yes. Girlfriend did a good job of that. Yeah.
Well, there was a very interesting weekend, which I managed to avoid very skillfully. So my son, Michael, who's kind of newly qualified in law, and he's getting married on the 28th of June. So he had a stag do. And his intended, his name is Georgina, we call her George, lovely girl, and they had a hen do. So my wife went to the hen do, and I skillfully avoided going to the stag do. No way was I going to get roped in. And luckily he came back with all his widgets intact and all his hair on his body. So apparently the biggest thing they had was bruises from playing Zorb football. Yeah, I just tucked myself in with a nice steak and a nice bottle of red and watched the Champions League. It was a good game and I enjoyed that. You know what a football fan I am. So, no, it's a good, really, really good weekend. Thanks for asking.
I'm just picturing you tumbling around inside an inflatable football.
You definitely don't want to do that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So today, well, obviously, we're having a good old wealth talk today because you've been out on the road. You've been doing lots of events over the last month, Kevin. And of course, you're always getting asked questions and there's insights. And there's in particular a few that have raised your attention and thought we'd discuss them in more detail today.
To me, it's fascinating when you live your life in your head and you give information out, then you've got the clarity of seeing it, right? So exactly how we create new content or we curate content, we know the clarity of the message you want to give, but you're never quite sure how it's going to be received. You're never quite sure whether it gets distorted a bit. Do you remember the old Chinese whispers, which is, send reinforcements, we're going to advance. And it comes back as send 3 fourpence, we're going to a dance. It's a bit like that. And sometimes I get a bit surprised by the amount of misinformation and the misunderstanding that's out there. I was doing a presentation to around about, what would I say now, 80 or so property business owners. And what was fascinating for me is the whole area of my work is all about creativity. It's about finding new ways to do things, new ways to look at things, new ways to evaluate things, and new actions you can take to make your journey faster, safer, and more enjoyable. And I was talking about SaaS in particular because for property people, it's a very powerful way of turning your pension into property. And I kept hearing people saying, surely this, and I've heard that. And it's almost as if somehow hearsay makes them doubt the integrity of the message I'm giving. And I'm saying, well, please, whenever you're building wealth, do not make decisions about surely this, because it's not surely that, because I can explain to you that whatever you believe to be true is not true. But based on fact, here's the evidence. Now you've heard the evidence. Have you now changed your mind? Yes. Okay. So try and avoid saying, well, surely, or I've heard, for example, someone said to me, oh, I've heard you can never use your pension to buy residential property. Okay. Who did you hear that from? And it's always somebody who's got a vested interest in the opposite direction, or they've just misheard something. And again, I said, look, there are definitely rules to follow, but there are ways, quite legitimate and genuine ways, that you can use your pension to buy into residential property in at least 4 ways. So would you like me to describe the 4 ways, says I? And they said, yes. So I did. And, I won't give all 4 because it's not a treatise on SaaS, but you can be over 55 like me, get your tax-free cash. You can borrow up to 50%, lend it to your limited company. And if your limited company does residential property, you could do that. Or you can convert something that starts its life as commercial and then turns into residential. There are rules, but, there's 3 ways right there. I'll give you the 4th one because you asked, Chris. Didn't really, but you could borrow somebody else's. So somebody could lend you money from their life or their SaaS, and their SaaS could help you by being a bank, and you become a borrower. And then their money, which is their SaaS money, becomes the source of residential property for you. The point is, it's not really about SaaS. It's about, in so many ways, when I'm out and about talking to people, and I love doing it, and this guy was a lawyer, and you think, they're into the detail. They wouldn't make a decision about the law based on, I've heard that, or surely this. They make decisions based on research, case law, and finding out facts. And it's just interesting for me that seems to be all too prevalent when it comes to wealth building, that there's misinformation that's out there continually. And it always fascinates me, because usually the misinformation holds people back. It never accelerates people. It's usually a brake. It sort of impacts on the brain. It impacts on the creativity. And as a visionary within Wealth Builders, my role, a definition of a visionary, is someone who sees things that other people don't see, is to constantly be on the lookout, as I am all the time, Chris, aren't I, for new ways to do things that will help people achieve a better result. Get more for less. And that creativity is constantly thwarted by what people mishear or hear in a different direction from somebody else. That's just one example, right? But I could carry on if you want.
Well, I know you were at a business event talking to business coaches, and there was a big aha moment amongst that crowd as well, wasn't there?
Well, yeah. And, it's an interesting one, because the challenge with business owners, and we love business owners, people who run businesses, because they're so multi-skilled, right? They've got to wear all the hats, spin all the plates, juggle all the balls, and they're in that place where they're doing everything, because instead of often creating structures around them, they become the structure themselves. They become the very challenge that they're hopefully trying to eliminate when they get to a place where they can get the business to work without them. And one of the key messages that this group was a group of very good people with great integrity called Action Coach. And you may remember that I wrote a book with the founder of Action Coach called Brad Sugars, who's an Australian, who always says something interesting to me when we talk about, when you're in business, you need to be a master in your own niche. You need to be outstanding in your niche. And he says, it's mastery, Kevin, it's mastery, with a really strong Australian accent. But when we were joking with the business owner coaches, I said, the key distinction I like to make for any business owner, other than the stuff I always do, which is make sure your business can work without you, become outstanding in a niche, and create streams of recurring income in your business if you can. Most business owners don't do that, right? They're trading time for money. And I've heard some people argue, and it's a standard joke in the coaching community, that businesses are the only people that work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40 hours a week for somebody else. And this is kind of partially true. But the point that I make to them, and this is where the aha moment came for them, Chris, is I said, whenever you look at the statistics of business owners who sell their business here in the UK, and I've discussed this on previous podcasts, I think, that only 5,000 businesses a year sell for more than $1 million. It's only 0.1% of the business population. The average age of the business owner who sells is 57. They're mostly male, by the way. But the average length of time, if I'm ever involved with a business, And the coaches reflected this because I asked them in a group of like 50 coaches. I said, how long do you think a business owner will tell you it's going to take for them to get ready for that business to be sold? Right? I said, it's not a trick question. I just want to know what you think. And I asked the very first person on the very first table, how long do you think? And he said, 5 years. And said, that's exactly what they say. They say, I think I'll be ready, Kevin, in about 5 years. Then you meet them again a year later, or I spoke to a business owner today, 2 years later. It's like, when you think about 5 years, right? It's always 5 years. And I said, and I know this to be true. What I say to the coach, to the business owners then, and this became the aha moment for the coaches, was, okay, if it's going to take you 5 years to get your business ready for sale, what if I could show you the most tax efficient, time efficient way to be completely financially independent in the next 5 years, so that by the time you get there and your business is ready for sale, you're already wealthy. And therefore, you've got two businesses. The business of the business in which you're engaged and the business of building your family wealth. And by asking the business owners to create what you and I know as the family wealth business, the name of their family's perpetual wealth, not the name of their temporary trading business. And when people get that, and when they can be independently wealthy within 5 years from the proceeds of the cash flow in their business, which is often temporary, and turn that temporary cash flow into permanent cash flow. That's my role when I'm talking to business owners. And they never got that. They never saw that the business owner can turn temporary cash flow, get the tax relief back on it. In other words, get the government to give them the corporation tax back and use that money to build their wealth. And they just never saw that. They just thought the only objective of a business owner is to sell their business. I said, no, they've got two businesses. And they went, aha, I got it. And hopefully, we'll be able to help the coaches put more tools in their coaching toolbox to be more effective, more able coaches for their business owner clients and serve them in a more interesting way, not just for them, but also for themselves as coaches. So they feel that they're adding more value, being more confident, and actually seeing that in many respects, the coaches themselves could become financially independent. It's very difficult to be financially independent, Chris, when you're a coach, because you're almost always trading your time for money. Whatever you're coaching, whether you're coaching businesses, whether you're coaching accountants, whether you're coaching people with mental challenges, whatever the business you're in, when you're trading your IP, normally you're trading time for money. And it was just a fascinating debate, and I found it interesting because I see the clarity of it, but it's often you don't really get a chance to see the meaning of it until you have proper engagements with intelligent people asking great questions, and then they get that distinction for themselves. Very satisfying to do that, Chris. So
that's an important point, isn't it? Perhaps our listeners now can think about is actually, are they building wealth through capital or focusing on cash flow? And we focus on the cash flow because we know that when you can generate that steady, predictable stream of cash flow from multiple assets, that you're not reliant on any one source of income, like in the business, as you say there, or some people reliant on that one source of employment, job income, work income. But cash flow is key. And the difference between investing for capital and investing for cash flow, there are some differences, aren't there? And perhaps maybe we can run through a few of those.
Yeah, they're quite fundamental, Chris. And it's a good point, because when people say I'm investing for the future, what is an investment? And there are only two types of investment, really. And I'll relate that back to businesses in just a second, because I think there's a fundamental flaw in the business selling process. But whenever someone is investing, they're really either investing for a capital gain or they're investing for a flow of cash, right? And we talk about that in the Wheel of Wealth, don't we? We've got a process in the Wheel of Wealth, and we either say you're investing, you've got to know at the beginning, are you investing for a capital gain or are you investing for cash flow? Now, cash flow is by far and away the best way to at least start as a foundation to intend to build wealth through cash flow, because cash flow, if you get it right through the definition of an asset, will be more predictable, more permanent, more effective, and you can pass it on to the next generation as well. So it's got longevity to it. In other words, if you build an asset well, the income flow is permanent. Whereas when you build it and you think about accumulation, almost always you're subject to a whole area of different risks. Now, let's go back to the business owners. Let's take our mind to the business owner who either takes guidance or doesn't, right? And I also mentioned to the coaches, by the way, there are two things that we at Wealth Builders, and me in particular, look to avoid, like the 3 A's. Avoid people who are arrogant. Oh, I know that, but what have you done? Oh, yeah, I know all about that. Okay, well, what have you done? Because it's not knowledge that's prized, it's the action that takes from the knowledge is important. So I don't like people who beat their chest and tell me they know everything when they haven't acted on it. And apathy, which is the act of permanently putting something off, not temporarily because you're spinning the plates and juggling the balls, but you just permanently never get around to things. And unfortunately, all too many business owners, I guess including my father, who died, as we know, very young, just didn't get around to doing things. Anyway, when you have all your eggs in the business basket, when you think about it, are you building the business for cash flow or accumulation? Most of them say, I'm building a cash flow. No, you're not. You're building accumulation. You might have cash in the business, but it's temporary profit, because the profit isn't permanent. You don't make the profit and the profit stays in your business year after year after year after year. You do the work, get paid, and then you make a profit on the transaction or the service or the delivery or whatever it is. So the real issue for business owners is they put all their eggs in the business basket and hope one day, someday to sell it. But they're not in control of the selling price. Now, I believe business owners work harder than most. They put in all the blood, the sweat, and the years, and more often than not, they don't get adequately rewarded for it. And I believe they should get a premium for putting all their eggs in that basket, taking the risk and working so hard. But they rarely do, because when they come to sell, they often sell at a point when they need to sell. And if you need to do something, then you become slightly less in control. I was going to say more desperate, but you know what I mean. Because you are too tired, you're too old, you're too ill, you're too whatever, and you want to get capital out of your business. And more often than not, because you've lived it, the very essence of it, it's sucked everything from you. You put a higher value on it than anybody else. Because what an acquirer wants, somebody who buys the business, wants permanent cash flow. They want predictability, but no business has got it. So they'll always downvalue what you value it at, which is why there's always this fundamental mismatch between what a buyer of a business puts on the value against the seller of the business puts on the value. It's not like a house where you can have a reasonable view of a RICS valuation, somebody values it properly, or a stock market share, what they're worth. It's very difficult to value a business. And when a business owner gets to the point, and here's one of the big issues for me, Chris, which scares the bejiggers out of me. When most businesses that do sell, because the acquirer does not really truly believe the figures, right? They just can't believe them because they're taking too big a risk. If they're parting with the money, they will put some form of an earn-out in the deal. So an earn-out is, I'll pay you this money, agreed figure for the business, but I'll pay you some now and the rest over time, right? So now the business owner who was in control of the business makes all the decisions, decides what plates to spin and balls to juggle, now working for somebody else. I couldn't imagine working for somebody else. I couldn't do it, and I'm sure lots of business owners who have enjoyed that control for decades in many cases just hate the idea of then having to go to work and report to somebody else as the MD in order to get the money. And for that reason, most don't. And they don't get that second or third payment. So you have to almost accept what was the consideration up front, and it's just can you imagine the uncertainty and the feeling you go through at that point? And my argument is be independently wealthy. Use the cash flow from your business that's temporary to build permanent cash flow. That's wealth building. So that if you do sell the business, you're not desperate because you're already independent, right? So you don't need to sell it for the premium price. You can sell it for a reasonable price, or you can hold out because you're not desperate for the negotiation to play out over a certain time frame. Or you could even consider other alternatives like an employee ownership trust, an EOT for short, where you can pass on the business to other people who are running it. And rather than get a lump sum, because you don't need one, because you've got a regular income, you can get tax-free income for the rest of your life from the business. Now, look, I've packed a lot into that, right? All I'm saying is to be independently wealthy makes sense whether you're a job holder, a business holder, or a coach. You just need to be, in my view, planning to build for cash flow, not building for accumulation. Now, most job holders, as we know from pillars 1, 2, 3, 95% of the population, as we know, don't become financially independent because they put all their faith, usually in one asset spread across two classes. They buy the stock market in their pension, in their ISAs, and they've got no clue how it works. And they hope that one day, someday, again, they accumulate enough money and they measure their net worth, right? So you've heard high net worth individual, heard that? So I was talking not too long ago, last week, I think, to a gentleman who I really have a lot of time for. He's called David. He's been mentored by me. And he said, you know what? I always wanted to be a high net worth individual. I always kind of measured my success on my net worth. And you're telling me that's the wrong measure. Explain more. And I said, yes. Because if you build your life on a value, let's say you build £1 million. When the days when a millionaire was a big thing, right? It's not anymore. But let's say you got £1 million. And you reach retirement, you got £1 million. You've accumulated £1 million. So your nest egg is worth 1 million. And you're 60. And you've had enough. And you want to pack it in. How do you convert that £1 million, which is a value, an accumulated value, into an income stream for the rest of your life? Well, unless you want to give it away and buy an annuity, which, yes, it's possible, but most people don't want to do that because they give away all the capital and therefore they won't leave a legacy from that. They do something which is commonly known as drawdown. I call it the hot water tank. So imagine in your head, Chris, a hot water cylinder, right? And the volume is 1 million, right? You got one inlet valve, which is growth. How many outlet valves have you got? A lot more than one, right? A lot more than one. Number one, losses. Does the stock market always grow? No, it doesn't. So if you imagine you retired in 2008, you had £1 million. What did you have in 2009? 700 grand? You lost a third of your money in a heartbeat and you couldn't do anything about it because you were not in control. You weren't able to add value. You weren't able to stop that. So you've got to look for something called sequencing risk, which is a risk that something goes wrong at the very time you need to convert the money into income. Won't get into inflation and all those sort of things because they're always going to be part of the economic wind that blows on us. So outlet valve number one is losses. Outlet valve number two, fees. Most people are paying disproportionately high fees than they should do. So the only recurring income that's flowing is out. Because if you're paying 2%, which is the average, people are paying, you got £1,000,000, how much are you paying in fees? It's a lot of money you're paying in fees for no real value add, right? So that money's gone. Now you're paying 20 grand a year for somebody to look after your money. No, that's a reasonable income, given the average income in the UK in retirement is less than 20 grand. This is a big pot we're talking about here. And then the third one is you've got to spend because you've stopped accumulating, right? And you hope the money goes up, but you're spending. And what do most people convert at? Well, if you were to go to an IFA and say, what do you reckon would be a reasonable income if I've got £1,000,000? They're going to say 4%. So you get 40 grand a year. You got 40 grand a year. What's actually happening is you're assuming it all works. The idea is your money should last. But what if it doesn't? What if the stock market goes down, the fees are too high, and you need more money than that? You need 60 grand, say, to live. You're now spending 6% of your money, which is then eating into so your cylinder's getting less and less and less and less. And that's why the average drawdown in the UK at the moment, Chris, is 8%. People are drawing 8% out of their pots. So it means they're spending their money faster than they can replace it. And they will run out of life before they run out of money. Now, what happens to your legacy if you run out of money? It's gone. You've got no life lessons, you've got no wisdom to impart, and you've got no money left. And all of that hard work you put into to bring certainty into your life, you now have an uncertain and a compromised life. And that really hurts me to the core, because if you switched your thinking from accumulation to cash flow and focused on cash flow, and you didn't worry about the value of the asset, you worked out what was the cash flow from the asset. Nothing wrong with topping up your asset from some capital, because you might need that for certain expenses, or you might just want the feeling of bolstering the value of your pot. But if you were to turn that into an income stream, and let's say you weren't paying so much in fees and you were investing in a wide range of assets, right? So property, intellectual property, joint ventures, being a bank, crowdfunding, you name it. I'm not saying what people should do. I'm just giving an example. But if you knew you were getting 4% absolutely concrete, then you can spend the 4% knowing that you don't have that risk of depleting your funds. But if you can make, by learning more, by investing in the biggest asset of all, which is your own brain, and you can learn how to get commercial property, let's say, was looking at one today with a guy, 415,000 he wanted to spend on the property, and the rental was 4,000 a month. Do the maths. Well, I know they're hard to do the maths if you're just sitting listening, but that's 11.5% on your money. If you can get 11.5% on your money, you don't have to spend 4%. You might spend 6% or 7%. So you can double your income without taking any more risk. You see my point, Chris? That if you focus on cash flow, then the right kind of cash flow will mean you never run out of money. The next generation can learn the same lessons as you and leave a much better legacy. If you do that as a business owner, you can be wealthy, so you don't have to sell your business. So you can keep it or sell it, it's up to you. And anybody who's a job holder does not have to live a life of uncertainty. And as our children live to 100 years of age these days, they're going to face this challenge more than anybody else in history. And I think it's important for us to learn these lessons so we can impart those lessons to them. Do you know what? I always rant and rave about stuff, don't I? But I hope you get the point, though, that I sincerely want people to get creative and don't go, oh, well, traditionally people do this. Surely people do that. And I've heard this. Do the research. Find out from people who think differently, because you have to think differently to be wealthy. You cannot think the same as everybody else in lockstep from the job to the pension to the hope for the best. You can't do that. You're going to run out of money before you run out of life, and your life's going to be uncertain. And that's not a life that I think is worth planning.
Very interesting, very thought-provoking. No, very thought-provoking. And as you were talking, Kevin, I was remembering podcast episodes that we've previously recorded, which may be of interest to our listeners now. Certainly the Wheel of Wealth, our method, which we teach to help you create either capital or cash flow. And a combination of both is good, isn't it?
Absolutely. Get both, yeah. Cash flow first, capital second.
Yeah. So I'll link to these episodes in the show notes. So if you'd like to take a look at those, click on your podcasting app now and scroll down. You'll see the links to the Wheel of Wealth. Also, Brad Sugars, we interviewed on the podcast. He's the founder of Action Coach. And that was a great conversation that we had with Brad. Employee ownership trusts, EOTs, we have interviewed and talked about that as well, and reducing fees. So all of those areas really important. Do click on the links and check those episodes out if you'd like to find out more.
And they all interconnect, don't they? This is the whole point about wealth, is you can look at things from many different angles and you can learn the lessons from many different ways, and you compound the impact of all of them. Whereas if you just do things the same as everybody else is doing, you're not learning any lessons at all.
Before we wrap up today's episode, I'd like to read out a review that's come in this week on Trustpilot on the WealthBuilders page. And this one's from John. And John says, I joined WealthBuilders just over a year ago now, and I can say it is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to understanding finance. If, like me, you are or not were financially astute, these are the guys who offer support and content in helping to build that knowledge. The company always seems to be available to answer any specific questions and get back to you in good time. And more importantly to me, it's got a friendly feel to the company, which extends to being part of the WealthBuilders family. Only last month, Kevin took time to have a call with me personally about some specific questions within my wealth building journey. And I can honestly say he really took the time to listen and help unblock some of the issues I was having in my own mindset. So happy to have joined, happy to still be a member, and happy to recommend to anybody who wants to start building their wealth.
Happy. So, thank you, John. And I appreciate that. And this adds another point, Chris, that all too often, we talk about business owners being in rarefied air. They don't always have a chance to talk to anybody because they don't want to share their challenges and problems with their staff members and team members often. So, and then similarly, when we meet people building their wealth, they're thinking differently. And because they're thinking differently, they can be on their own. Sometimes actually in direct competition with their spouse or partner. So it's really important, particularly, as life lessons are always challenging. It's never not challenging. Like, wealth isn't easy. It's really hard, but it's doable. But the fact that the lessons can be learned and you can surround yourself with people when there was a guy that I just want to mention, a guy called Kevin McDonald. He's a very good guy. I like him a lot. And he was saying almost the same point that Louise Hill made, which was resilience in consistency is the key. And it's the times when you need the help, when things aren't kind of going according to plan, is when you need to surround yourself with that community, because they hold you up, they buoy you up. They help in times when it's difficult, not when times are really easy and you're smashing it out of the park. So I think that's a really, really good point that he made. And I'd like to echo that and thank him for making that point.
Great. Well, I shall add that link as well to our conversation, or your conversation in particular, with the CEO of Go Henry, the children's debit card. And that's all there in today's show notes. So that was a good conversation. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you sharing those insights. And I know you're back on the road again in the coming months. So hopefully there'll be a few more that we can share with our listeners in due course.
Well, somebody else has got to listen to me, haven't they? Well, anyway, look, I tell you what I do like. I do like getting the speaker feedback because we ask for that, don't we? And I'm pleased that consistently, people talk about Kevin explains complicated things in a really simple way. Actively engages with the audience, not just a pitch, it's not a presentation. And we're so keen to give insights wherever we can give them. that people can learn for themselves, but then tell somebody else so that they get fitter, stronger, better, and don't think, surely, traditionally, I heard from anybody else. They come back to us or go find another community that can support them in the same way. So I just try and nudge people to get into communities where they can feel a bit more supported.
And we've got the free Wealth Builders community on Facebook. So if you're not already a member, search Wealth Builders, all one word, and we'd love to have you join us. And if you want to find out a bit more about how we help our members, then head to wealthbuilders.co.uk. And Kevin, you and I will be back same time, same place next week with more Wealth Talk.
We will indeed, my friend. Until then, see ya.